The disorienting dilemma. That last verse there in the second line. But he bids me go through the voice of woe. And this is a song that us older folks in here, we've probably sang as a kid and over again, and maybe it's one of our favorites, and maybe it brings emotional response. But did you hear that? Through the voice of woe, through the struggles of life, we're called to Christ. Wow. You know, unfortunately, though, that's often the only time that many of us go. We go when life's turned upside down and inside out. We've talked about that. But today, the last part, some of you are probably glad the pastor isn't going to preach on this book anymore, but it's just so much about us changing, of us moving from understanding that God's punished us now, or whatever we've mixed into Christianity, whatever we have made part of and diluted it down to create moralistic, therapeutic deism. Remember that term? That we find God as something that we do because it makes us moral. We're supposed to be good moral men and women, and little boys and girls. It's therapeutic. It makes us feel good because God loves us. But it's deist in that God is just kind of out there. God's really not hands-on. And yet, here we are. And the proof that we often use that God is not hands-on are dilemmas. And yet, in reality, the disorienting dilemma is biblical. At one point, Dean refers to it in her book as being off-kilter. Not a term that's real popular anymore. For us older folks, we often say it's out of kilter. It's off-kilter. And our younger folks are like, what the heck's a kilter? You know? What are they talking about? You're geezing on me. And being off-kilter is a blessing, according to Dean. A blessing? Really? Really? When my life feels like I just don't know which way I'm going. I don't know what God wants me to do. I can't do the things I used to because I'm too old, I'm too weak, or I'm running out of time, I'm running out of money, whatever it is. But yet I know I should. I just can't seem to get life in balance. I don't know about you, but most of the time I don't see that as a godly moment. Many of us say that, well, it's nice that we have a group once a month that goes to Our Daily Bread in Baltimore, but, I go in there and there's 800 men, women, and their little kids coming to get food because they're living on the street or they're living in a house, but they don't have the money to buy groceries anymore. But they're living somewhere going down there. We send 5 to 6, 8 folks once a month amongst our churches to go out there, and those folks, though, can't wait to go. And some of us go, I'm not real comfortable out there. If I go there, I went one time, but I didn't like the way I felt. I didn't like seeing all those people. Now, in your defense, we're not all intended to do the same kind of mission work. Spiritual gifts are different. We see that in Corinthians that Paul talks about difference in spiritual gifts. But sometimes being off kilter is what we need to see life the way it's supposed to be. So years ago, as we heard Janet's testimony and Wayne's testimony and folks that were gone to missions in Africa, and they've gone to Africa and they come back, and one of the things when our daughter went the first time, one of the preparations that they gave her was that they went through this whole series that when you come home, you're going to have these feelings. And the feelings are, you're going to, and you need to, and they told her, you need to make no big decisions for like several months. Because you're going to want to give it all away. You're going to want to turn the electric off in your house. You're going to want to get rid of your car. Because you're going to have this feeling of guilt-like because you saw happiness and you saw people so distraught and you have so much and yet you're not happy. You're out of kilter. And that experience, as great as it was to go on a mission trip, to go to Christian camp, to go to whatever it is, to go to youth group, to do these kind of things, it puts you in a position, but sometimes the emotions that you end up with make you feel a little off kilter. And that's one of the things that she talks about here is we're to touch a little bit. There's a young woman named Gabrielle who does a mission trip to Mexico. And when she comes home, she's really struggling with a lot of those things that Janet and all of them talked about when they came back from Africa. And thinking when they went, oh no, I won't have that. And then you come back and you go, because somehow we seem to think that if we can deprive ourselves, that somehow that helps us. And it really doesn't. We even do it in our own country. If we can take away from some people, then that's got to help those poor people. But it doesn't. Really, it doesn't. What helps them a whole lot more is when those people go directly and give what they've experienced. If I'm a great engineer and I can go and design something for a new shelter for the homeless and help them design it and give that gift, isn't that a lot better than if I just tell my boss I want to make half my salary because it'll make me feel good because I'm too rich? And that's what some of our people do. Oh, they're just, and we're going to get into the wealth thing on what happened here in this story because it's going to matter. Being off kilter. You ever played the game Jenga? With the little blocks, so you got to pull them all out like that. I don't know if you've seen them, but I've seen on TV down. They actually have like life-size Jengas that are made like with 2x4s and stuff. And you can build this tower, and people go out to they go out to the bar, happy hour, and these places have these Jenga games, and they play, and it's a big deal. Our younger folks are really into some. That's life, folks. What happens when you start the Jenga game and all the blocks are square, they're all together? Is there much tension? Oh, okay, I can pull the first one. I got the one up top. And somebody will pull the other one out of the middle because they know the one in the middle is not going to collapse because there's still a whole lot left. Now, however, once there's like 10 or 15 of the pieces out and it's starting to be a little off kilter, what happens to your focus? What happens to your heart rate? What happens to your emotions when it's your turn? It's just a game. What happens when it actually crashes? Ah! It's a collective inhale. Being off kilter actually enhanced your response. You were more focused. You were more intense. And yet we don't want to be off kilter, and neither do I. But off kilter changes our view and it makes us more aware. And it does this. In fact, sometimes God will knock us off kilter just to see Christ. In your handout today, there are a few questions, and as you're following along, there's not a place when we get to the Ignatius, you'll probably have to take notes on the back. There's reference to Scripture in Acts, which we didn't read. And you're going, oh, Pastor, you didn't read it. Well, for those of you who are familiar with church, those who don't, it's worth reading. This is where Paul is on the road and is converted and transformed. What did God do to get Paul's attention? He knocked him down and made him blind. Now, folks, I think that goes beyond off kilter. But that's what Paul needed. Paul knew so much about Christianity. He knew so much about Jesus that he knew how to pick out his followers and go find them and hunt them down and torture them, and maybe even kill them. He knew all about Jesus, had it all down, was a great academic in it, but he wasn't seeing the big picture. And in his case, it meant being knocked down and blinded. But today we read about a rich man. And if we're going to teach, Dean calls it, and it's really kind of an odd word, she says teaching toward transformation, and she calls it tools for faithful reflexivity. All right? Now, what she says is that in our Western world, in Europe and the United States, in this way, our education, it teaches us to have a logical consciousness. We want to know that A plus B equals C. And many of us are convinced that everything can be explained in that way. It's gotten so in the United States. Oh, well, it's all about science, and science is everything. Well, where did science come from? At least the study of science came from people. Science comes from God, which for some of you may be, oh, science took cover. Yeah, science and God are together. God created all things. So this logical the consciousness is our awareness of how the world works. Yet, she says there's a mythical consciousness as well as a logical. And in the mythical, that's an understanding of why the world works. That's when it gets uncomfortable. I can understand this logical, but the mythical is a different story. She says that in the mythical, that it encompasses, symbolically encompasses our deepest beliefs. Our deepest beliefs about truth, our deepest beliefs about myths, our faith, our spirituality. That is in the mythical consciousness part. Those who support transformative learning, she says, argue that both are essential. You can't just be in the spiritual world, and you can't just be in the logical world. Plato and Socrates would both agree, believe it or not. Transformation, she says, usually has 4 moments. First, it's a disorienting, a dilemma. Something happens that disorients you. Something happens that creates an uncomfortableness. And if you're a scientist, it's the unexplainable. I can't explain it, so I create a hypothesis or a null hypothesis, and then I prove or go to disprove it one way or the other. Because I've had a disorienting dilemma. I can't explain something. Something has happened in your life that has been a disorienting dilemma, and it's probably happened multiple times. It probably happened in maybe the divorce of parents, or maybe the death of a friend when you were a kid, or a failure of a class in school, or abuse that occurred when you were a child, or maybe it was just a disorient that you had to move. But this disorienting dilemma occurs. And then there is a critical self-reflection. Okay, this has happened. Now, I have to reflect on where I am in this. What's going on? And then 3, she says, is a discourse that puts into words and insights our critical reflection. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to write in a journal or write in a book, but we have a conversation either in our head or in our journal or with other folks about, so what's happened? Why did this happen to me? Why does it happen to me and it doesn't look like it happens to somebody else? What's going on in life? It seems like my family's getting dumped on, but theirs is getting away with everything. It seems like your side of the political world is always getting cheated, and the other side is getting all the benefits. So you got to have the discourse, 1, to sort out what's true and what is not. Then 4th, there's an action. How do you respond to it? Well, in Greek, that's called metanoia, because metanoia means conversion. In Christianity, we talk about conversions, but metanoia is that, the conversion and for many, we think it's a one-time event, that we are converted. You know, it's the old fire insurance thing. I came to salvation, I know Christ, I can go do whatever I want, because I got my fire insurance, so I don't go to hell. And yet it's not. So biblically, that's never the point. It is more than that. It is a growth. It is all of these because these disorienting dilemmas never stop. They just keep happening. Wesley says that we go toward perfection. And that was one of the words that Justin read this morning. And Wesley says we grow in grace. That we get closer and closer to God each and every time that something happens, and we can, in Dean's terms, critically self-reflect, look at the discourse, and then have an action. Creating continuous metanoia, continuous transformation, requires disorienting events and dilemmas. Some of us can remember that maybe we went to West River Camp, and we can remember going to West River to Manitowoc or Christian Camp to Lake Junaluska, and it was a great, maybe that's where we found, we gave our lives to Christ. And we said, man, if I could only go back to camp, because that must be where Jesus is. Because that's where I found him. Maybe for some of us, it was at the end of a movie on Main Street in Laurel, that Billy Graham had a movie, and this young guy went down front because the movie said, come down front. So Jesus must be in the Laurel Theater. Well, that's scary because about 3 months ago it was raised. Can't be true, is it? Some of us think maybe it's at the church, and maybe our old church is gone, or our old church is in California, and we can't get back there. But that altar rail is where we gave our life. No, God wasn't just there. That was this is the disorienting, the dilemma. I'm feeling away from God, but I can't go back to where I think I found Him. That's why transformation or metanoia doesn't happen once. It's continuous. We celebrate, we share the event, we wrestle. Every day we wrestle with God. We wrestle putting ourselves out of kilter because we don't want to be out of kilter, so we don't go there. I don't want to go there. It makes me uncomfortable if I talk about that part of God. If I because if I go over there, then I may have to get more involved. I might end up in youth ministry at 60 or 70. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. So I might end up wanting to give more money or give more time. It makes me uncomfortable. We wrestle with where Jesus is, and it makes us out of kilter. For those of us who know the poem called Footprints, what happens when we're completely disoriented and out of dilemma and there's only one set of footprints? Is it because Jesus left? No, it's because we're being carried. We accept the constant judgment adjustments. Ignatius wrote an examination for consciousness, and it's a prayer model. And that's what's at the bottom of your handouts. If you need to know here, it is. Recall is one, that you are in God's presence. This is going to sound a lot like what Dean wrote. Recall that you're in God's presence. Return in thanks to God for the gifts of the day. Ask God to reveal the truth as you look at your actions. 4, review the day, looking especially for spiritual consolation, places of increased hope, charity for others, sorrow for your sin, inner joy, peace, and identity in areas of spiritual desolation, darkness of your soul, lack of confidence, sadness, thoughts that lead you away from God. And then 5, react and respond to Jesus personally, putting into words your heart's desire, asking for forgiveness, for strength, hope, comfort, giving thanks for the consolations. Paul was struck blind. The rich man believed he wasn't completely there. The message is, he said, Lord, what do I need to be perfect? Do you know that is the only person who was told to give everything away? We often think that Jesus wants everybody to give everything away. Well, if everybody gives everything away, then who's going to take care of those who have nothing to give away? Did you think about that? Now, that doesn't mean you get to be rich and greedy. But what happened was the rich man said, man, I'm following you. I'm believing you. I really believe in you. He said, but what he was saying was there's just something. What do I have to do to be perfect was the word that you read. What do I have to do to be saved? And it was not the money, but it was the love of money. And in this man's case, Jesus knew he had to create a disorienting dilemma because this man wanted to be saved, but he could not give up his love of money. So he told him, give it all away. All of it. Because that was his disorienting dilemma. What is ours? Maybe ours is just simply our giving. We can't get past the giving that we are, either financially, time, talent. Maybe it is this idea of immersed in the world. I got to have my kid going to this camp and to that camp and to the other camp because he's got to get a scholarship or she's got to get a scholarship in sports, and yet we forget that it's a small percentage that end up with a scholarship. Some of us could testify to being number 1 in your class in high school with a perfect 4.0 will get your kid nothing except mommy and daddy's checks. No anger in that, but it's a reality. Less than 1% become pro athletes, folks. But did you hear about the negatives, the loss of family time, because we were so busy running and going and doing and thinking and saving our money and never got to use it and doing all of that stuff. Do you ever hear about that part? Not much. But we get sold on the other. The disoriented event is we have chosen to be almost Christian. We have chosen to believe in a worldly education. Education's valuable, folks. I'd be the first one to tell you. But it isn't number one. What is the rich man's dilemma? What did he do with it? Remember the response? Did he sell it all and give it all away?
No.
He walked away from Christ. We walk away. Our churches walk away. Our disoriented dilemmas are we just go, yeah, but the world says, and we got to fit in. Eileen said it earlier. It's time to stand up. Move on. We need to accept metanoia full time. We need to be off kilter. We need to allow ourselves to go where we're uncomfortable. When we do, we need to review it and we need to respond. And the response needs to be, Jesus, this is what I need. How do I get there? Face your dilemma. Face your off kilter. And know that to be Christian, all great disciples were off kilter. And they responded to Jesus. Amen. The last song, and we'll sing the first.